Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here today. Well, last week we started talking about the Lotus Sutra. Or the Dharma Flower Sutra. And the Lotus Sutra, sometimes it's called the Three-fold Lotus Sutra because there is a short sutra at the beginning, more or less a preface to the Lotus Sutra proper, which is called the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings. And then at the end, at the conclusion, there's another short sutra called the Sutra of Contemplation of the Dharma, Practice of Universal Sage Bodhisattva. So the three, with the Lotus Sutra proper in the middle, are considered the Threefold Lotus Sutra, and traditionally they're packaged together. And last week we started talking about this Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, the preface, in a sense, which is also divided into three parts. And the first part that we talked about last week had to do with this assembly of all these different beings on Vulture's Peak, listening to the Buddha. And this week, we get into more or less a dialogue between some of these beings and the Buddha. And the dialogue begins with a question. The spokesperson for the group asking the question is Magnificently Adorned Bodhisattva. And he, along with 80,000 other assembled bodhisattvas, ask in unison a question. And I'll read a little section about that, about the question and part of the answer. Then, Magnificently Adorned Bodhisattva, with the 80,000 bodhisattvas, said to the Buddha in unison, World-honored one, if bodhisattva great ones want to attain supreme awakening quickly, what gateway to the Dharma should they use? What gateway to the Dharma leads bodhisattva great ones to attain supreme awakening quickly? A restatement of the question. The Buddha said to Magnificently Adorned Bodhisattva and the 80,000 bodhisattvas, good people, there is a unique gateway to the Dharma that leads bodhisattvas to attain supreme awakening quickly. If a bodhisattva learns this gateway to the Dharma, he will achieve supreme awakening. And then Magnificently Adorned Bodhisattva says in follow-up, well, world-honored one, what is the gateway to the Dharma called? What does it mean? How does a bodhisattva practice it? He's wanting more specifics. The Buddha replied, "Good people, this unique gateway to the Dharma is called innumerable meanings. A bodhisattva who wants to practice and study the gateway to the Dharma of innumerable meanings should observe that all things were originally, will be, and are in themselves empty and tranquil in nature and character, not large or small, and not subject to arising or extinction, not fixed or movable, and neither advancing nor retreating. Like empty space, they are non-dualistic. All living beings, however, make delusory distinctions, weighing whether something is this or that, whether it is a gain or a loss, and then bad thoughts come to them, producing a variety of evil actions. They transmigrate within the 6 realms, undergoing all kinds of suffering and harm, from which they cannot escape during innumerable billions of eons. Seeing this clearly, Bodhisattva great ones cultivate sympathy and show great kindness and compassion in the desire to extricate others from suffering. What's more, they penetrate deeply into all things. In accord with the character of Dharma, all things emerge. In accord with the character of Dharma, all things live. In accord with the character of Dharma, all things change. In accord with the character of Dharma, all things perish. In accord with the character of Dharma, bad things emerge. In accord with the character of Dharma, good things emerge, live, change, and perish. Bodhisattvas, observing these 4 modes and being thoroughly familiar with them from one end to the other, should next observe clearly that none of these things continues to live even for a moment, but emerges and perishes every moment, each emerging, living, changing, and perishing in an instant. After seeing this, the abilities, natures, and desires of living beings can be seen. As natures and desires are innumerable, sermons are innumerable. And as sermons are innumerable, meanings are innumerable. The innumerable meanings emerge from one Dharma. So the question raised is, okay, you're telling us, Buddha, that there is one gateway that you can quickly become fully and completely awakened. So what is it? Be more specific. The Buddha answers in a way that doesn't quite satisfy that desire for specificity. And instead challenges the listener to open up. This theme of diversity of teachings, diversity of meanings, diversity of individuals, different kinds of beings, is a recurring one throughout the Lotus Sutra. And in a way, within this diversity, there is unity. That's the message that the Buddha keeps bringing. That though there are all these different teachings, all these different ways of practice, all these different meanings that we ascribe, the Buddha indicates that they're all skillful means, that they're a way of pointing a direction. But they themselves are not it. And I think the questioners keep wanting that specificity. What is it? What is the sermon of innumerable meanings? What is the Dharma of innumerable meanings? And a device that is used throughout this little preface of Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, and also throughout the Lotus Sutra, is self-reference. The Buddha keeps talking about innumerable meanings without really telling us what the meanings are. And praising the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, or the Sutra of the Dharma Flower, without really offering the Lotus Sutra or the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings. So we'll get more into that. I'm going to go to the next little section I would like to share. And this is introduced by a question again from these 80,000 bodhisattvas. In what sense is what you preached in the past, the meaning of all the Buddhas, different from what you preach today? Because the Lotus Sutra is advertised as a more advanced teaching, something that is beyond what has previously been taught, not necessarily contradicting what previously has been taught, but including it as well as other teachings in a larger teaching. So how is this different from what you've told us before? The questioner clearly is wanting something more graspable. The Buddha responds, "Good people, after sitting upright for 6 years under the Bodhi tree at the place of the way, I could attain supreme awakening. With the eyes of a Buddha, I could understand that not all the teachings could be proclaimed. Why was that? I knew that the natures and the desires of living beings were not the same. As their natures and their desires were not the same, I taught the Dharma in various ways. And after more than 40 years, the truth has not yet been revealed. This is why there are differences in the way living beings take the way and why they do not attain unexcelled awakening quickly. This is why there are differences in the way living beings take the way and why they do not attain unexcelled awakening quickly. And then he goes on to talk about a simile of water. That the nature of water is the same, but a stream, a river, a well, a pond, a valley stream, a ditch, and a great sea are distinct and different from each other. The nature of Dharma is like this. But though the water but even though all these different forms of water occur, they all have the nature of water. And water washes equally well. A well is not a pond. A pond is not a stream or a river, and a valley stream or a ditch is not a sea. But they all have the character of water and can wash away afflictions. Good people, he goes on, after leaving the king of trees, the Bodhi tree, when I turn the Dharma wheel of the four truths for the 5 men at Deer Park in Varanasi, his first sermon, Kondanya and the others, I taught them that all things are originally empty and calm, ceaselessly changing, arising and perishing in an instant. And then, when I spoke in various places during the middle period, proclaiming the 12 causes and conditions and the 6 transcendental practices for monks and the group of bodhisattvas, I also taught that all things are equally empty and calm, ceaselessly changing, arising and perishing in an instant. Now, preaching the great vehicle Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, I also teach that all things are originally empty and calm, ceaselessly changing, arising and perishing in an instant. So even though there is this great diversity of teachings, it's all about the same thing. It's all about the observation that there is nothing static. And the questioners here would seem to be seeking some static answer, some conclusion, something that is bounded, graspable, countable, numerable. And the truth that the Buddha is trying to convey is fundamentally not that. Farther on, Buddha tries to explain because the questioners keep questioning and wanting more specificity. But he says, therefore, Bodhisattva great ones, if you want to attain unexcelled awakening quickly, you should practice and study the profound, unexcelled, great vehicle Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, again, referring to itself. After the Buddha had finished teaching this, the 3,000 great thousandfold world trembled and shook in 6 ways. Various kinds of heavenly flowers, such as the blue lotus, water lily, and white lotus, spontaneously rained down from the sky, and innumerable kinds of heavenly perfumes, robes, garlands, and priceless treasures also rained and came rolling down from the upper sky and were offered to the Buddha and the many bodhisattvas and the Shravakas and to the great assembly. And that is the near the end of that little section called Dharma preaching. Well, how far do we take this? I think the understanding of these teachings, including the Lotus Sutra, evolves with the times necessarily. I think any tradition without that evolution tends to wilt and perish. So our role is to take these wisdom teachings of the past and do our best with whatever wisdom we can, with whatever wisdom we can bring to them, to try to apply them to our world, the present, now, what's happening for us. And these teachings, the Lotus Sutra, there are many commentaries that have been interpreted, reinterpreted, and practiced in various ways for centuries. But we're tasked with trying to bring them into 2023. What do they mean? And each of us can contribute to that enterprise of bringing our knowledge and experience to these teachings and treating them with a degree of reverence, but also with the flexibility to apply them to current affairs. The Lotus Sutra is, as I see it, a highly liberating text. There are all these different varieties of beings in this congregation that the Buddha is addressing. Not only human beings, but many other kinds of beings. And all different kinds of human beings with different backgrounds. And the teachings he's talking about are widely varied. The literature of Buddhism is immense. The difference in practices of Buddhism is broad. And these teachings of innumerable meanings of the Lotus Sutra are encouraging us to look at all of this as a skillful means. One could use the analogy of a finger pointing at the moon. And that is a common trope in Zen Buddhism, going back to sutras that were written probably around the 1st century CE. And I think that works to a certain extent as a skillful means in itself. But I'd like to share with you at conclusion a poem by Rokon, a early 19th century Zen teacher, highly eccentric. We've talked about his poems before, and I think we'll return to them again. But this is a poem that he composed. Relying upon a finger, we see the moon. Relying upon the moon, we understand the finger. Moon and finger are neither the same or different. This expedient analogy is for guiding beginners. Having seen reality as it is, there is neither moon nor finger. So I think we'll stop there, and we'll go into breakout groups.